Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the West Melbourne City Council workshop and meeting to order. It's June 6, 2023. You'd stand for the pledge and a moment of silent meditation, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. We have roll call, please.
Mayor Rose.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Frampus. Councilmember Bentley.
Here.
Councilmember Young. Councilmember Ditmore.
Here.
Councilmember McDowell.
Here.
Councilmember Adams. Here.
Good to have everyone here tonight. On tonight's agenda, we're going to be talking about the budget workshop. This is proposed capital improvements and major sewer maintenance projects. Mr. City Manager.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. We are excited to present in our series of budget meetings. We are excited to be at the stage of kind of the final stage before we get into the nuts and bolts of the general fund budget. So we are here tonight to talk about capital projects. What we've done from our initial meeting talking about capital projects is we've incorporated the priorities of the City Council. So anything that got 3 votes or higher got rolled into be a council priority. And so we'll go through a quick PowerPoint, and then we are happy to answer any questions or get into any details and talk about the items that we would like to, this presentation is items we plan to include in our full budget. And so kind of gives an outline of what they are, what they cost, and then we'll roll that all in and present it as part of our full executive budget here next City Council meeting. So,
Mr. City Manager.
Go ahead.
Last, when we had the sticker patrol, where we all put our stickers on our thing, and there's a lot of talk and people moving stickers around, what happens to the items that didn't make the list?
So any item that didn't have more than 3 or more stickers did not make the council priority list.
So, for instance, are you saying salary and benefits are not a priority because it didn't make the list? Or are you saying that we shouldn't do safety on different areas? Not everybody wanted to waste a sticker on some things that are priorities of council, but yet are important to the city. I mean, my example...
These are the council priorities, not the city manager's priorities.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask the city clerk after you do this to put up the ones that didn't make the list, and I don't have anything in particular in mind yet, but just to see if there's any one of those that maybe we want to move to the list.
Excellent. So moving forward, the council priorities that were voted on last meeting via the stickers, again, 3 stickers or more made this list. Continuing to focus on low taxes and maintain a healthy reserve. Obviously, we're the top. The first 3 were the top 3 vote getters. Investigating alternative funding sources for potential fire, which we'll actually have a presentation at the next City Council meeting. And then improved communication with local businesses and residents. Again, those were the 3 priorities. And then, as you can see, priorities 4 through 10 are also listed on the sheet. And items that were fiscally driven with a number, we did incorporate, tried to put a number to and roll that into the full CIP budget, which is in the documents that were presented this evening. So just touching on the cost here of these capital improvement projects. These are the different funds that these items are broken out of. Again, these are all the capital projects, not just the council priorities. And so we're looking at about $26.5 million in capital improvements for 23-24 budget. These are the top projects for the city staff, that the city manager is moving forward with recommendations. Again, new building, council chambers, We have our local street resurfacing program, the vehicle replacement for the police department, sidewalk repairs, Field of Dreams playground, and again, depending upon how the action is tonight, that might take care of that item, at least for the maintenance part, and then incorporating that full replacement into the full CIP into the future. Path to Schools crosswalk is an item that's important to us, and we've identified a few sites that we can continue to add upgrades to help with the pedestrian traffic crossing. Increasing our tree maintenance budget along 192, and specifically at the 195 interchange. We were doing a twice a year tree maintenance. We're looking to do a 3 times a year tree maintenance. Sidewalk accessibility improvements over at the tennis court. Mitten Road 192 landscaping improvements, which was something that is a big picture item that we'd like to explore. We know in the past there had been some landscaping along those routes, and then the county had got involved and removed some. We'd like to explore opening that door again, and then looking at the big picture, gym or senior center, replacing the VMC building. So proposed projects, using our Rescue Act funds and non-major accounts. Obviously, the Parks Master Plan, which we'll be coming forward with a recommendation to hire the consultant for that at the next meeting, and then bleachers, canopies, covering at the skate park, and then Clements Wood Park Pavilion. So I want to get that pavilion addition there at Clements Wood. Stormwater, Melbourne State's drainage improvement continues to be an ongoing project, and efforts continue every day on that project, and it's going along very well. Focus on flood risk reduction, and then, of course, the Westbrook flood risk reduction project, which is the consult is underway, and we'll be having a citizen meeting coming up to talk about some of the recommendations that they have from that project. And then Norfolk Parkway, Shallow Creek, as we know, talking about the signalized intersection there. And then looking at our next major road reconstruction project, which is the Henry Avenue project, looking at it in 2 phases. One, tackling some of the areas that are falling apart due to insufficient soils and base, and then looking at a full replacement for Henry Avenue. So those are some of our bigger capital projects. So coming from the water fund, as we know, moving forward with the water production water, and so wrapping up some items to get us there. The 3 wells are under construction, and then the 3 monitoring wells will soon start construction when the production wells are further along. Melbourne Estates, as we know, again, continues to move forward. The mains are in place. Now we're working on laterals. Designing new the water plant, so we're working with Hazen and Associates to finalize the final design for our future new water plant facility. Water line replacements, again, looping areas that need to be looped when we get off of City of Melbourne's water main system. Doing our raw water from the wells to the production site, and then from the production site back to the mains. And then, again, important project in order to be able to supply water. And then water supply, tackling the final well, which is already in existence, how to get it to the Henry Avenue site. Greenboro water main extension, again, kind of on hold right now, as Ellis right-of-way is being acquired. Once all the Ellis right-of-way is acquired, the Greenboro water main extension project can move forward. And then additional water loop study. The northwest corner of beautiful West Melbourne is a little light in water mains, and so one of the items that we'll need to tackle at some point is how to loop that part of the community in to make sure we have water coming from multiple directions. And then last but not least, but as we're all familiar with, the Ellis Road widening project, which is a major undertaking, and there's a stakeholder meeting coming up in next week regarding the Ellis Road. So switching over from potable clean water over to our wastewater. So we have the process improvements, Sheridan Road septic to sewer project, which is adding a couple of properties. Hopefully, if the funding stays in the budget, we'll be able to pick up an additional 13 properties as part of that grant that we received. Hollywood Boulevard reuse is ready to go out to bid, and so we'll be getting the reuse line installed, redoing that reuse line, getting that installed. Doing our normal sewer lift station rehab, our U-lining, and our manhole replacement, continuing to work through the community, replacing and lining those facilities to keep the infiltration out. And then Wingate Boulevard water reuse extension analysis. One of the concepts moving forward is in order to get more reuse out into the community, finding more spots to put that reuse. And one of those facilities in the study that we had identified was our city park and possibly Rhodes Park. And so studying how we can get some reuse out into that direction in order to get rid of more reuse. Once we have our water plant up and running, as a condition of that plant was to increase our reuse to the community. And then last but not least, the sludge pumps that are needed down at the sewer plant. So that's on there. And that concludes the short presentation. Kind of ran through that quick. All those projects are in the packet with a little bit more detail and costs associated with them, but wanted to give this presentation to kind of kick off the capital improvements, and happy to go in any direction the council would like from this point forward.
Ms. Young?
Thank you, Mayor. Wasn't expecting to be called on that quickly. Can you go back to slide number 1, please? All right. So I was looking for safe routes to school. So on the projects, maybe it's the next one. There we go. All right, I just won't use those. All right, so for safe routes to school, there was a grant. I know that this says for crosswalk upgrades. Is crosswalk upgrades included in that grant allowance? Because I know we've applied for those grants.
We are happy to explore that option. I think we've identified a couple of different intersections that could use some additional flashing lights for crossing, similar to what we did on the 4 intersections on Henry Avenue.
Okay, in the replacement of the of vehicles, it had been in the past that we knew that we were going to replace our vehicles every 5 years, so we just had a pot, we put money in, and we put money in, and then every 5 years we just automatically had the money to replace the vehicles if needed, not just to replace them, but if needed. So it wasn't necessarily a project. So has that become a project now?
No, just an item in here. You know, the police department, when we get into the general fund budget, we'll talk in more detail. They're looking to replace 3 of their vehicles, similar to past years, and so that's part of in the budget. The other additions for vehicles, looking at 2 electric vehicles for the building department, and so Public Works and our mechanic have been looking at some of the ones that are on the state contract and just evaluate. So we're moving forward with those are the vehicles. Not a lot of vehicles being replaced this year in the 23-24 budget. But you are correct. We have a designated fund that each department essentially pays into based on which vehicles they have in the fleet. And each year they pay into that, and so that we don't get into a situation where we have to replace vehicles and borrow to do it.
On the e-vehicles, isn't there a grant right now for municipalities or just for states that do this, that put e-vehicles in their?
We're actually pursuing some grants, and then we are also pursuing the possibility of using some hurricane mitigation funds that our Brevard County became eligible for. So we're looking at that as a possibility as well.
All right, thank you. And then I'm almost done. On the reuse, are we looking to extend to common areas, or do we know if residents want reuse water because they have to tear up their yards and put this in if they're going to have what's already there?
Yeah, the study that we had done from ISS about a year ago was in conjunction with, in order to get our consumptive use permit from St. John's for our water plant, they identified a request of the city to try to use more reuse water rather than put it down the deep well. And so when that study was concluded, one of the top items of a way for the city to use more reuse, because as you mentioned, going into neighborhoods and trying to convert old systems to our reuse system might be a challenge, identified open green spaces that take a lot of watering. And so one of them was the school, and we did reach out to the school, and they didn't have a lot of interest because it was reused water. And so then the next two items were our community park and Max Rhodes Park as locations that we could send reuse water to and be able to utilize that off hours.
And then,
So nothing to interfere with our current residential reuse program.
all right, and my last question is regarding Ellis Road. And I know this is coming up at the meeting on the 12th. So the total project, $81,108,81.1. So Brevard County has put in $7 million, and TPO federal money has put in another $8 million, and FDOT has put in just under $20 million. As I asked you before, West Melbourne has about 60% of Ellis Road, and the remaining goes to Melbourne or will go to the county. However, with us having 60% of that road, I certainly don't want to pay 60% of the cost. So of the money that we are going to put toward this, do we have a fund for this? Are we preparing? Or I don't want to, everybody's ready to go, and then we can't because West Melbourne is short on their ante up.
So to my knowledge, the only financial commitment that we have made to Ellis Road is a low number, approximately $20,000 to relocate one of our lift stations that would be in the way of the project. And that's the only financial commitment that I am aware of that we have committed to Ellis Road. I know obviously the county has committed in the granting and the programming, and the city will maintain the road when it's finished. That's part of the agreement, is that it becomes a West Melbourne road. But to my knowledge, we have not said, like, we have not pledged. And again, a lot more people on this dais here longer than myself, but to my knowledge, we have not pledged any kind of dollar amount to the Ellis Road project.
All right, I know we talked about this being part of our CRA. If we need funds to contribute to this to make it happen, are we prepared? Are we going to?
It would be eligible for CRA funds because they specifically, that agreement specifically calls for that. But that would be a policy decision of the council at some point in time to discuss whether we're going to pay for Ellis Road.
Okay, thank you for your indulgence. That's all my questions.
I mean, is that everyone's understanding? Is that we didn't give them that big fake clearinghouse check that said we pledge X.
Let's just say that we've given more money than the city of Melbourne, and that road leads to the airport, but they need to pay to play, I would think, as well. But I think we put aside some money for buying some acquisition of property for drainage purposes.
That's in the CRA budget.
Right.
But nothing pledged as far as like a day, here is X dollar amount on X day.
Yeah, it's definitely bigger than that. I want to comment on the reuse. Wouldn't it be a lot cheaper and a lot more prudent to offer the reuse to our own residents that are using it now, so we don't have to put one new pipe in the ground, just open it up a couple more hours a day, or another day a week, or...
Yeah, that's certainly an option. One of our challenges, though, in the wet season is we have a hard time, even now with our customer base, getting rid of enough reuse, and we end up putting a significant amount down the deep well.
Yeah, I would think we should try that, because reuse is not the best product out there, and schools have always said no because of the liability of the stinky water and such, and parks aren't a whole lot different, I wouldn't think, having to run lines out there and change all that irrigation would be very expensive. So I think we can get creative in our own way and open it up a few more hours. I know you extended some of that, but
We didn't extend 1 hour each zone.
maybe another 60 minutes and see how that works. So, especially during the summer, you really need more than twice a week irrigation, it seems like. So, I mean, when the dry season, I should say.
Yeah, we take a look. I mean, open to all options. The gist of it is we need to get some more reuse out. The less reuse water we put down the deep well, the more capacity we have to put other items down the deep well.
Right. At certain times, we don't even, nobody's at the plant to really distribute it, right?
It's fully automated.
Even on Sunday?
The plant is operated 6 days a week, 7 in the morning to 11 at night.
Maybe that 7th might be cheaper than doing the other. I don't know. Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Rhodey, in page 407 for our packet, it had broken down all of the different costs and which fund we're expecting each of these projects to be coming from. Do we have any sort of expectation of how much of each of these total costs is then going to be covered by grant money versus directly from the funds from the city?
Sure. When we wrap up all these projects into the full operating budget, it'll have the funding sources, and a lot of these, as you mentioned, and as the council is familiar with, many of these projects are grant funded to a percentage. Some of them 100%, some of them 75-25, but many of these projects are grant funded.
That's what I thought, but just wanted to check. Thank you, sir.
Can you put up the items that didn't make the top 10 list and see if, I know Ms. Young spoke on one or two of those, to see if there's any of those. I think we used all those that went up to 4, so the top one,
Three and higher. Anything three
and lower. Yeah, didn't make it. Okay, is there any of those that council, not trying to spend our money, but any of those worthwhile
Yes.
to really talk about?
Yes, I'd like to talk about street sweeping. That's very important for the debris that is in the road from, well, all kinds of things, accidents and other things. So I'd like to keep the street sweeping. I know we talked about maybe not having our own street sweeper was a conversation we had. And, of course, we do hire that out as well. So I think the conversation ended there. But I think we still need to keep that, still need to keep it going. And then, as it is right now, we're not getting rid of it, are we?
Correct. It continue to operate with our contract that we have for street sweeping.
All right, it was this, and what I'd asked before, which is what residents are asking when they don't have a curb to push against, when the street sweeper itself has to do curbless roads, such as Palm Lake Estates, and I know we have some others, they really can't do a good job because it just throws it out there. So I was hoping that we would find a company that has sort of a roller type thing, that they could actually service those roads, and those kind of goes up to the sidewalk as well. Very similar to what they do up with snow up in the northern territories, which I'm sure you've seen.
We just plow it into people's front yards.
Yes,
Not
so
driving.
I'd still like to work on the street sweeping. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Frampus.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I wasn't fully aware of the consequences of where we placed our dots and that things wouldn't be included, but I really think it's important to address the parking at Clemens Wood Park. I know we talked about Tallwoods as well, but they already have parking. There is no parking at Clemens Wood Park, and I really think the residents struggle when they pull up there on where they can park, and if they park in front of the playground, people complain about it. If they
Park on the road, people complain.
yeah, it's like I really think that I'd like to see it stay on the list. And there's several other ones that should also stay on the list, but I don't know. I think we should keep them all on there, honestly. Thank you.
Mr. Bentley?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one question. I was questioning that if I look at page 4-5 and item 9, you speak of a rate increase for the Stormwater Special Revenue Fund. And I was kind of questioning why we're doing that when we've gotten, I think, $460,000 last year special funding from a request that I put in. And this year, between myself and Diana, we got $1 million funding for stormwater uses. So it seems to me we've got a pretty good lifeline going there, and $1.5 million in the last 2 years. It kind of seems like we wouldn't need to put a rate increase in that category.
Sure. So one of the reasons why we're looking to consider a rate increase, again, not for this year, not for this year's budget, but for to put it in to review it for next year, is those programs that you talked about were grants that were splits. So one of them was 75-25, one of them was 80-20, and the other one was 50-50. So the stormwater utility funding is already starting to dip, and so our concern is because flooding is such an important issue here, we want to make sure that fund has enough dollar amounts. I believe the total stormwater utility brings in six and change. Is that so? So we're talking about a total utility fund of just over $600,000. And
but you couple that with the $1.5 million that came in,
right? But those grants were, one was 50-50 and the other one was
right.
75-25. So, and that's, keep in mind the stormwater utility is operating the staffing that's, out there with the Minzy muck and doing the work. So it's not as if the stormwater utility is just for these project funds. It's got some operating costs in it every year.
Thank you, sir.
So we'll have that full analysis in front of you during the council. It's just something we had talked about possibly this year, but with the potential for the waste hauling fee going up and the potential, and tonight the public hearing for the water rate going up, we thought let's put a pin in those and let's take a look at stormwater next year.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
That fund was low because we borrowed against it, right? I mean, we were just building it back up. I mean,
we were in the red.
Low.
We're behind the curve, yes. I'll wait for the analysis.
We draw it all the way down to zero, and then we say it's low, and we got to raise it up.
Yeah, but I understand what you're saying, but I'd wait for Tim's analysis.
We'll put it together.
Sometime.
It's the one point I just want to make on it is it's a small fee, and it's only a $600,000. Not that that's small. I mean, if anybody's writing any $600,000 checks, I'll stand in line. But as a utility, that's a very small.
Right. No, I understand. And I would also comment that there is a requirement for matching funds for the money that we've been able to get. And I've seen it both times that we've gone for it. One of the criteria is how much are you putting in as a city. So obviously, if we want to keep getting that money, we got to keep doing our part. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. Question about this list, looking at these that are on our screen right now. These are the ones that are short of the number 3 up there because that's on the list of the top 10, correct?
Correct.
So it's 2 and below. Those are all items that didn't make the list, but they're some of them actually did make the list in various levels of discussion, but it's not like it's not going to be addressed or we can't address this down the road. It isn't like just because it's not on the top 10 doesn't mean if we find that come mid-year we've got some playground issues, that's on here, correct? I mean, it isn't like we wrote them off, correct? He's just had lower priorities. Well, if they're off the list, they're not necessarily completely off limits for us to address down the road if we wanted to. or am I missing something? We make changes and exceptions, at least in the
No.
2+ years that I've been here.
I think you're correct. Just because it's on the top 10 list doesn't mean we have to do it either. It may not be budgetary wise, it may not be a priority at a certain time. So, just a couple of things that resonate with me on this list is obviously public safety didn't make the top 10, but that's everybody's top one, I'm sure, in this room. Also, Deputy Mayor talked about parking at Clements Woods, but one of the things that the Powell House, as we rent out and stuff, we don't have any handicap parking or really any parking there. So I think it needs to be addressed. And some cheap dollars is some speed signs on existing signposts that we see all over. That's really cheap dollars to do, and I think we can work some of these cheap things in this year's budget. Ms. Young again?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There's 2 comments on here regarding employee salaries, and we just had the wage analysis done, so isn't that covered with that? I know we adjusted wherever we needed to. Would that not have been addressed?
I believe both those. I see the first one. Let me.
Salaries, yes, they're together, salaries, and then consider raising minimum wage from $15 to $17.50.
Correct. Yeah, we're not proposing up to $17.50 quite yet, but we're approaching that direction. So.
Okay, but I mean the whole idea of the salaries for employees would have been covered in the wage analysis we just did.
I believe so. I believe those 2 items have been.
So those 2 things would not be on this list.
I think the intent of the prioritizing is just to, what do you want as a council? What do you want to focus on? In a perfect world, all of these ideas, would be top priority, but there's only so many hours in the day and only so many dollars in the budget. And so by prioritizing, these are the items that we will continue to focus on as a staff and keep you posted on as we do with this year's budget priorities in order to get accomplished. So I think that was the gist of it, but I also think Councilmember McDowell makes a good point. Certainly throughout the year things change, focus adjusts, and so we continue to be flexible, and if something needs to rise to the list, it does, and try to accomplish them all.
All right, thank you. This is a very good list. They're all very important, so thank you for keeping them here.
And some of these goals will be accomplished this year, and some of them are multi-year, raising money until you have enough so we don't have to borrow money to do some of these projects. All right, what else we have?
So this is the CIP. So I just want to take a quick second, and if our amazing clerk could go with the calendar, the budget calendar. I'm putting her on the spot here. She's scrolling around. She's smiling, at least. That's good. So up on tiny print on your screens is the 2023-24 budget calendar. So we are obviously at June 6th presenting the capital improvements and major sewer maintenance projects. So next week on the 15th, when the packet is ready to go out the door for the meeting on the 20th, we will be sending the City Council the operating budget for the beautiful city of West Melbourne, Florida. And then on June 20th, we will have a budget workshop number 4, which will be the presentation of the actual general fund budget, which will incorporate all of these items. So at that point in time, that's when we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the actual operating. And then, as you can see, our one meeting in July, we will then have to tentatively have the discussion every year that the City Council undertakes, which is the tax rate. And we will present options at that meeting, and that you are not setting the tax rate at that meeting. You are just setting a specific number of which you can go down from, but you cannot go up from. So that is when the budget process gets serious. So, any questions about the process or any information?
I believe you received the estimated things from the property appraiser.
We did.
You did pretty well.
By June 1st, we had to get our official numbers, and in classic government, we got them a couple hours before that, so for the deadline. But we did very well with value. The exact number is escaping me at this moment.
It's about a 9% increase from last year's number.
But
So 9% increase in total value for the community.
Just the values.
well, there's two different numbers that the property appraiser talk about, and one is new construction and one is existing. So, do you have those numbers?
Not off the top of my head, no, sir.
I can
think-
email, but
I think it was, you saw those, I think it was 10%, 10 or 11% for our existing property, and together like 31%. Is that? Yeah.
I didn't see that, but I'll double check it.
Okay. Yeah.
Big numbers.
It was. I mean, that includes all new apartment complexes and just new tax base, obviously. But when you put them both together, it's a little different.
we did very well, and that's a good indication of our growth and our strong property values here in West Melbourne.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes these numbers are deceiving, like, well, Palm Shores one year went up most of anybody in the county because instead of building one house, I think they built like 3. So, I mean, that was a huge increase. So, but, yeah. Mr. McDowell?
Just a question about what did we have did we have projections in there before this?
Value?
Of value?
We did not project value. It comes out from the county assessor each year.
Not even a
So we-
wild guess.
We do an estimate. They give us a estimated number that we base a lot of our calculations off, but it's not fine. They have to give us a final number by June 1st. So
The final number comes July 1st. So estimated was June 1st, and then we get the final number July 1st. So during this month is the time that I can kind of work the numbers and see and at that point estimate, but I would never trust that number 100% until we get that final on July 1st.
And then we only use 95% anyway to squirrel another 5% away, right? Good. All right. So, anyone else have any budget concerns? Anybody know any good games till 6 o'clock? All right.
there are still sandwiches available.
All right. So, seeing none, we'll recess this meeting and reconvene at 6 o'clock.